Is there anything, for starters, in Flavia's speech that you would agree with?
There wasn't very much in it. What I mainly got was an I want list, followed by a set of claims and rather presumptuous insults.
Douglas goes right for the jugular, folks. Right, he goes, there wasn't much in it. Remember when Flavia in the beginning called him fools, along with the other populists and conservatives, in terms of what they were sort of bringing or taking away from the table? So Douglas Murray goes right after me and says, wasn't really much in it. With just a laundry list of ideas that don't make any sense at all. I mean, it was a great opening salvo.
It was hard to find any meat there at all on the bone. That might be because it's rather hard to find any work that Flavia has done other than a tiny campaign in a tiny country. By contrast, of course, it's obviously very much the case that she's read and absorbed everything I've written, which is why she's so happy to be so insulting when she meets me almost in person. So no, there wasn't very much to pick up on other than the rather ill-spoken, ill-lettered and rude attempts to attack me. And I'm sorry about that because I think that it demonstrates her own personal failing as much as it does a failing of the cause that she would like to lead before she got tired and decided to get out. And that is to say this, it's a shame that people like her refuse to engage on any of the important terrain. So much of my time in recent years has been spent engaging with serious actors with serious reputations, not people like Flavia, people who have spent their life working on these issues and have made very successful political careers, for instance, from doing so. I've always noticed, wish to engage on the serious terrain. When I speak with leading politicians across Europe, who I happen to disagree with, I find that the most important and impressive ones do not get up and read bucket lists of what they'd like to do and then insult people. I find that they try to, for instance, understand what other people are thinking, and particularly try to understand what the public might be thinking. For instance, they might try to work out whether the public is sometimes trying to tell them something, and whether the public who they disagree with might not in fact be onto something on occasion. After all, it's very easy to draw rather comfortable lines around yourself and your own ideology, such as it is, and declare that everyone on the other side of it is, for instance, an evil populist or what is it, a fool? That's right, a fool. What an amazing way to speak about somebody else to their virtual face. And what an extraordinary way to speak about majority population votes in our continent. I see very little likelihood of anyone like Flavia, for as long as she remains in the public eye, being able to achieve anything much because she keeps dismissing the public. And the public tend not to like that.
That is such a great point, and that happens so often here in the United States of America, folks. Aren't we talking about? That's why Donald Trump in 2016 was able to win, because nobody, when we elect our politicians, when they go drink the water in the cesspool of Washington, D.C., something happens to a majority of them. They change. They become part of the elite. They become part of the establishment. They become entrenched in the Washington, D.C. political and social life. And they forget about where they came from. They forget about their constituents back home. They forget about the people, and they start working for the corporations. They start working for the elite, the establishment, the powerful, the ones with money. That's what happens. And so, like I said, he's basically saying that with Flavia calling everybody on the other side just fools and incompetents, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're trying to take everything away, and they're basically stupid. Well, Douglas is countering with the fact is that how brazen these people, how presumptuous they are, that they think that it's only their way or the highway, that's what it is. There has to be a consensus that's built. And the rule of law in voting, if that's what people have voted on, you may not like the side that the vote comes on, especially if you're on the opposite side of that. Your opinion is different than the side that won. But in a democracy, in a republic, that's what goes. That's what moves forward. That's what's put out there. That's a policy that is implemented. And so Douglas basically is saying that, look, these people, they're pretentious. And Flavia, he's saying, is really not on a league, not even with other people, and certainly on the same league with Douglas Murray.
Flavia, your opportunity to respond to that. Let's take up on this last phrase, the public.
Right, I can only say...
Are you reaching them?
I'd say so. I won 7 times against right-wing populists with big majorities. I don't have more to add.
All right, let's see if we can get somewhere with the two.
She said she won 7 times or 9, whatever it is. What did she win? What the hell did you win? Why don't you explain what you won? Well, against large majorities. I'd like to know. What is it that you won? How did you beat some of the people on the conservative side?
Of you. Flavia has argued, I would say, as I listened to her, that the best starting point for a European identity would be the liberal institutions. Douglas, what will be your starting point for a European identity?
Well, you have to start at a much more fundamental and deeper level than that.
Does it get any more fundamental and deep, I wonder?
Yes, of course. I think it gets a lot deeper. Before you get institutions, you have to have the ideas and the philosophy that produce such institutions. Institutions do not just land like food parcels in countries.
I agree.
Yeah, so they come from somewhere. So clearly there is a deeper level, despite your attempt just now to pretend there isn't. Clearly there is, so we could agree on that. So the deeper level is, where do the institutions come from? Where are the ideas that the institutions come from? Now, I would say that in the case of Europe, there is a very deep set of ideas which you can draw out with some understanding across the continent, and are best seen when you look at the continent from anywhere else. I think to some extent Flavia's ignorance of my thought is betrayed by the fact she seems to think I'm, among other things, some weird right-wing populist nationalist. Again, she's clearly engaged with none of my work. But one thing I've repeatedly said is that there is clearly such a thing as a European identity, because you know it so clearly when you're not in Europe. I've spent a lot of my life.
That is so true. That is so true. You know, listen, there's an identity of being an American. And when you go to other countries, you realize why that country that you're in is not American. And what Douglas is saying is that absolutely. I mean, just think about it, folks. If you went to, India or China or Saudi Arabia or Russia or these other countries, some of which are, being, led by either authoritarian regimes or dictators or people that have just, stayed there in the presidency for a long time, or a king or a queen or whatever, you realize right away that although they may say that they have some fundamental rights and there are some liberal ideas that are going on in those countries, it is so much different than Europe, and it is so much different than the United States of America. And so Douglas is hitting it right on the head. And Flavia, she just absolutely never went over these points. I mean, her thing is that she wants everything to be completely open borders with everybody being able to, but only in the European, countries and whatever. What about saying the same thing? Why not tell China, open up your borders? Why not tell the other countries, open up your borders to do? No, you just tell your country and others like you to do it themselves, but you never expound those ideas to go beyond those boundaries to those authoritarian regimes that will not listen to you at all.
Traveling all around the world, and as I write in one recent book, there's nothing that makes you feel so close to Europe or so clear about what it means than, for instance, if you're standing in China, as I've done many times. There you see that there are specific philosophical and cultural inheritances that have made Europe what it is, including the liberalism which Flavia abuses or throws around like one of her confetti words, and I think doesn't quite understand. But liberalism in the truest sense in Europe is a distinctly European idea. It's an idea that Europe also gifted in this form to America, which there's a lot more to be said about. But yes, European philosophies and currents of ideas come from a very deep and long-established set of wells. And they are the thing that produce the institutions which, in many cases, we can agree on the utility of, and indeed the virtues of. I think it's somewhat typical of self-proclaimed anti-populists that they pretend that institutions only belong to them, or that their opponents simply wish to pull them down. The one thing I would add to that on the issue of European identity is the considerable, very serious variation that exists across the continent. Again, I've written about this many times. There is a very considerable degree of difference across our continent. It needn't be seen to be some kind of threat. It has been, I think, one of the great virtues of European civilization across the centuries, that the extraordinary range of ideas and cultures exists. But as I say, once you step away from it, you can see that these very disparate and diverse societies do have some very deep wells in common.
Douglas,
So we're going to end that segment right there. But he literally, when he came out here, folks, and initially just came out and basically said there's very little of substance, no meat, so to speak, on the bones about what Flavia is talking about. That he basically also said that she's not in her league, let alone the league of some other politicians and other people that he debates in, that she has no understanding of what it means, of what institutions really are, where they came from. And he basically points out and he says, before institutions, you have to have ideas and philosophies and principles that came first, that made those institutions. And then he goes on to say that these institutions are, that these the anti-populists and liberals and socialists, Marxists, they just think that they're institutions of the left and that's it. And that the people on the right and populists want to tear those things down. Well, that's not true at all. So he systematically goes through and he talked about, all was a wish list, a bucket list. And he goes, nobody sensible out there, with any brains or whatever, literally just goes out and says, here's my bucket list of my wants, needs, and desires. Anybody can do that. But the fact of the matter is, how do we get to those? What is it that's going to help strengthen the entire society? Not just me. You've got to take a look and say, okay, at the individual too, but how is it going to help the rest of society? How is it going to help that country that these policies and those things are being talked about? How can we fundamentally keep those ideas without them changed by this constant flooding of illegal immigration or even legal immigration if it's way, way too fast and starts to change the demographics and the cultural aspects of the country that it's already in? So he really went after her. And this is obviously, I don't think Flavia is in the same league as Douglas Murray. Anyways, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, like, share, and follow us. Let us know what you think. This was part 5 of the debate, sponsored by the Forum on the European Culture between Douglas Murray and Flavia Kleiner. Folks, I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Take care and stay safe.